Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I want to look at a case that's been in the news here. And so the report here is common law partner, 2 others charged with providing ammunition to the Nova Scotia shooter. And they note 3 people, including the gunman's common law partner, have been charged with providing ammunition to the Nova Scotia man responsible for Canada's worst mass murder. And because this is a controversial topic, of course, this video will be demonetized. This is entirely Patreon supported. I've got a link to my Patreon below if you want to contribute. So they note that they've charged 3 people with providing ammunition. So this is a transferring ammunition without authority. And one of those people is the common law partner of the shooter. So one of the first things I want to look at here is the issue of what this offense involves. So this is section 99 of the criminal code. I'm assuming, I haven't actually seen the court documents, but it's hard to imagine what else they'd have gone with here. So this is weapons trafficking. And it notes every person commits an offense who, and A, manufactures or transfers, whether or not for consideration. So consideration is you get something in return, be that money, be that goods, be that services, whatever somebody might give you. But that's actually not relevant here. It doesn't matter if you got paid, except possibly on sentencing. The court's probably going to look at it a little more harshly if you were doing this for profit rather than if you were just sort of helping a friend out or something along those lines. And it involves prohibited firearm, restricted firearm, non-restricted firearm, prohibited weapon, restricted weapon, prohibited device, and here's the big thing, any ammunition. So that's a big thing. And then it's knowing that the person is not authorized to do so under the Firearms Act or any other act of Parliament or any regulations made under any act of Parliament. So that's what she's likely to be charged with here, and these individuals are likely to be charged with. So let's have a look at the punishment for that. So punishment in the event of a firearm, but however, this also includes any ammunition. So if you're transferring any ammunition, guilty of an indictable offense, straight indictable. This is not hybrid. There's no summary conviction option here. And liable to a term of imprisonment for a term not exceeding 10 years. Now, people get tripped up by maximums. They say, well, the maximum is, this, so that's what they're looking at. Nobody really gets the maximum usually because it's for the worst case scenario. And I don't think, even though we're talking about, really egregious consequences, I don't think we're looking at the worst case scenario here for people who are simply charged with respect to ammunition. But let's look at the minimum punishments. In the case of a first offense, which I'm assuming is probably the case here, 3 years. And in the case of a second or subsequent offense, 5 years. Mandatory minimum punishment of 3 years. That's a big deal because 3 years in prison is a fair chunk of time. There may end up being a constitutional challenge as to whether that is excessive. And the Supreme Court has set out that you can challenge that not just on the basis of this specific circumstance, but on the basis of what we'd call a reasonable hypothetical. And so there may be grounds for a challenge here. I don't know. But when we're looking at this, there's a few things that sort of spring to mind here because 3 years is a fair chunk of time, particularly given that, first thing, we've heard that the common law partner here was abused, and that, in fact, it may be that the killer tried to make her the first victim of this, and that she was lucky enough to get away and hid. So that's, when we're talking about charging somebody who almost got killed here with a sentence or with charges that carry a mandatory minimum punishment of 3 years. Ouch. The other thing that just occurs to me here when I'm looking at this, first of all, they say, as a police agency, we cannot, however, dismiss evidence from the investigation that others contributed to the incidents by providing the gunman with ammunition he used on April 19th or 18th and 19th. And I think there's a bit of a problem here because the RCMP have taken a lot of flack over this investigation. So I personally have some concerns about, is this something that is possibly deflecting blame here? I noticed that we still don't have any charges with respect to shooting at a fire hall where people were taking refuge. So it seems to me that if you're going to start with charges, maybe charges over the shootings that endangered innocents there are a place to start. But the other aspect here, and I don't mean to, dismiss anyone's contribution to these events, because these are, of course, horrible events. And I can understand that there's definitely a desire to punish the people involved here, regardless of the extent of their contribution. However, one of the sort of things that occurs to me is that it's likely that the only way the police have evidence about how this ammunition came into possession of Mr. Wortman, because of course he died in the course of this. He didn't provide a statement himself, but it seems to me that it was likely that this information would have come from the people who are charged. And that's likely because they were trying to help out the investigation, and they were trying to provide information to the police and trying to fill in the blanks of what happened. So, what do we learn? Well, we learn here that the old adage of don't talk to the police is a really good good lesson here, because these people, I don't think, anticipated that they would be charged here. I think that they were trying to sort of fill in the blanks, trying to tell the police what happened so that the police could understand this thing. And in the case of at least one of them, probably trying to explain to the police their own victimization by these activities. But because they provided that information, it looks like they're being charged. Now, this is my best guess, but I can't think of any other way that the police could have concluded that to a degree that allows for them to lay charges. Ammunition, of course, is pretty hard to track. And so absent some sort of statement, it's hard to see how they would have gotten to charges here. Now, the police are being very tight-lipped. They've revealed the names of the people charged and what they're charged with, but they're not actually telling the public anything of, sort of how this happened and how they got their information. So these are my best guesses. I don't know. This is what I'm venturing here. But it's kind of, if you still had information about these events right now, and you were sitting there at home thinking, well, should I maybe tell the police? Should I help them out? I'd be really reluctant to join in on helping them out, because anything you tell them will suggest that there's some possibility that you get tied to it. And I should also note that the police have indicated that they don't believe that any of the people involved had any reason to think that, or any reason to expect what happened. And again, when we think about who had reason to expect what might have happened, it looks like the police, the RCMP, had some fairly substantial tips about dangerous activities here that they just never followed up on. So I have some concerns about what's going on here. All of this, I'm really wanting to see the results of this public inquiry. I'm hoping that this public inquiry is being undertaken by people who are perhaps unbiased, uninvolved, not connected to the RCMP. But we'll see. I have concerns, and like all Canadians, I would like to get to the bottom of this, and I would like to know what happened here and where the failings were, because it looks like there were some balls dropped on this one. Personally, I would love to see a copy of this guy's RCMP file, but that's the sort of unredacted information we're just unlikely to see out of even sort of the public inquiry, because I think Canadians want to know sort of what they knew, what reports they got, when they got them, what they were thinking at various points, what steps they decided to take, and what steps they decided not to take. Anyway, as I mentioned, because of the content, this is entirely Patreon supported, so I want to take a moment to thank my Patreon supporters. At the $50 level, Demo, People of Canada, Sir Daniel Wicks of Alberta, and Canada's National Firearms Association. At the $20 level, Kevin Fleet and Dale Nesbitt. And at the $10 level, Ma Buddy Keith, Process Eng, Stephen Larson, General Counsel of the CCFR, John Robinson, Tim Rogers, Roy Haddock, Freckles Dack, John Alexander Tessier, Cameron Johnson, Sir Goat, Sights and Arms Limited, Chaba Hollow, Peter H., Craig Kwan, Akin Coxall, North Central Process Service, Toys R for Boys, Ian Vaughn, Milan Brekic, Terrence Griffiths, Doug Thompson, Mark D., Brad Crooker, Jason Harrington, Lee Kiso, Mark Stout, Michelle Stotzel, Scott Sweetman, Mike Rhodes, DF, Stacey Cartmill, Tactical Advantage TV Canada, Ian S., Dave Leslie, Juan, Donald Duncan, Darren Duell, Sean Crane, Ian Hutchinson, Rory, Travis, BC Bushcraft Leather, Johnson Garty, Misa Komarevich, All Systems Go, David Moga, Ian Hedgedanek, Hello from Venezuela, that still makes me laugh a little bit, Taylor Delnea, Rod Guzman, and Matthew Nesbitt. Thank you once again. This is a bit of a controversial topic. It's still developing, but I would personally like to know more because I have some concerns about sort of what's happened here. And I'm worried that things like charging their informants is likely to suppress how much information that we as Canadians ultimately get, because people are going to be very much discouraged from cooperating with the investigation. And I will just jump back here to note, police say the 3 people charged in the investigation cooperated with investigators and had no prior knowledge of the gunman's actions. I bet they're regretting the cooperation right now. You know, looking at 3 years. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope this has armed you with knowledge.